Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Crow's Nest number 13. I'm Pr0nogo, and I'm joined for the first time on camera. It's Veeq7. What's up, dude?
Welcome.
What's
Hi.
up? We'll finally get the
It's pretty
face
cool.
going. You got the equipment. You said you
Um,
upgraded your microphone recently too. So how you doing?
yeah, I have a pop filter, which is
There you
should be a
go.
little bit better.
There you go.
That's good. That's useful. I'm doing pretty well. I'm pretty happy about all the things going on in the No Frauds Club. We have a lot of new players
Yeah.
and a lot of new staff. I feel like we really have a. It was a really big success for the launcher, essentially.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
it's essentially one click to play, and people have been happy with the experience that we made over the years, and it's very gratifying to see that.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because you don't normally think to yourself, oh, all that's missing is the scale of the player base. But just by virtue of exposing more
Yeah,
people to the ideas, I think we've had a lot more positive engagement. And I don't know, it kind of reminds you that you're not crazy for, dedicating 7 years or whatever. In
yeah,
your case, a little bit less, but still a considerable number of years to a sort of isolated, community. And it is still pretty small in the grand scheme of things. But we just passed 500 Discord users very recently in the last couple of days. So definitely an exciting time. That obviously it's only some of those people that are going to be active, but now it's closer to like 50 daily players, maybe more than that. That we don't have
yeah,
like metrics to
and
log it or
we
whatever.
have
But
daily castovers now.
oh
I'm
yeah,
pretty
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
So yeah, it's pretty cool.
yeah,
Always nice when I see that, like the one in the notification bell and
there it
on
is.
YouTube, and it's something epic, and it's like, oh, composition is king, which
Right.
is really nice summary of Cosmonarchy, actually.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So we've taken to calling it a whole new game built within StarCraft One's engine, and as dated
Yeah.
and janky as that engine can be to work with, and of course to experience a product within, I still think that honestly, Cosmonarchy is probably the greatest RTS experience out there. Which is weird to say, especially weird to say about my own thing, but I mean, I wouldn't say it if I didn't think it was true, even though obviously I have some
Yeah,
skin in the
it's.
game.
I think we've experimented with some successful ideas.
Mm.
Removing supply was a great move,
Hmm.
especially removing the cup. But it's also nice to not have to deal with the mini game that just breaks all your production and
Yes.
is just so aggravating. And we integrated upgrades into
Yep.
units, which means we immediately get to see more stuff going on. We have way richer tech trees, way more choices, way more units, way more things are happening,
Hmm.
and there's also way more scale, I would say. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, one thing
And
that's been
we
interesting to note about the way that the scale has been achieved is it's not necessarily that one big blob of an army fights like and the blob is bigger. It's more like there's a lot more battles happening across the whole map, which is kind of cool in my opinion. I
yeah,
actually like that a lot better because it reinforces the idea that you got to keep those plates spinning, right? You got to keep switching tasks and do these
yeah,
raids and
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. Some of it is probably because of the tech design. Some of it is probably because of just how Brood War
Yeah.
behaves. And I saw like on like a recent video, Day9 and mentioned like the big difference between StarCraft 2 and Brood War
Hmm.
is that in StarCraft 2 you can essentially the game can end in a moment because you can just have this like one punch attack with your whole army, and it's more about those like whole army fights rather than the multitasked skirmishes all over the map, which is more the Brood War style, and it's definitely more gratifying the style we have in Cosmonarchy. I feel like it achieves both the skirmishness of Brood War and also achieves like scale greater than both Starcrafts probably.
I
I
would say
feel
so.
like right now, and also the pacing doesn't feel out of whack, so that's good.
Yeah, there's definitely some stuff that we might be able to refine. And the other thing that's good about having more players too is the idea that like they are going to help you find things that might be super busted or super out of whack, or maybe just mildly
Yes.
busted and mildly out of whack. Like recently, there's been for example, like a very specific granular example for people who do pay attention to the project and kind of know about it. The Legionnaire has become like a dominant unit in PvP, and
Mm-hmm.
even though there was later on some responses that came from that, like you and Hapsea were are two Protoss players, or I mean, you're kind of a player who plays everything. But obviously
Yeah.
the idea of you guys sitting together as like a brain trust, trying to come up with some solution to that problem in the mirror matchup, and it turned out to be
Mm.
using like a different production structure entirely than where the Legionnaire comes from. And despite that being existing as like a potential counter, if you happen to open gateway into another guy going gateway, it's probably a little bit too determined by the Legionnaire. And so all I did was increase the training time by 1 second, and we're going to see how that goes. Because I actually think it's like that minor,
I'm
right?
actually more interested about the side change, it going from 7 to 6, because 6 range is actually not that much.
Yeah.
When you realize it's a circle, so like each point of range is actually exponentially more than the previous point of range. So at this point, this unit is pretty fucking blind.
Yep. So, you know, maybe that'll also factor in because people are using it as the scout. And if it's less reliable as a scout in terms of the area, but more reliable in terms of speed because it's a faster unit, then there's like a trade-off when you scout with a Legionnaire versus a Zealot, or, you know, your worker obviously has like more sight range. So stuff like that can be, you know, something that compounds. I don't know. I just like the fact that there's 50 units per race on average, and that we have like, you know, in the first 10 minutes, you'll have gained access to as many units as were in the original StarCraft, you know, on average, if you think about like building the extra structures. I feel like
it's really a great thing, and sort of one of our greatest achievements is that we can have units like Star Sovereign and they're not busted.
Yes.
And actually it feels like you don't even want to go this like Giga OP unit because there are other options that are probably better. So yeah, I think it's pretty cool. Yeah. It's something that no other, maybe no other. There are some that I have not really experienced. It's something new. I think has a lot of units too. Like
a 0K maybe, something like that. I think that's one of them.
That Faguta
mentioned. Either that or it's Beyond All Reason. Those are like the two that come to mind.
Yeah, those two. I think. Yeah, I have not checked those yet. Maybe I should. Anyways, I think it's a great achievement that we can have those units that most people would consider unbalanced, and they are perfectly good. It's like they have weak spots, they have strong spots, they have a role.
Yes. So
it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And it's also interesting to see people sort of discover uses for units that otherwise maybe would have been left by the wayside, because you might look at them statistically or based on their cost, and you kind of just surmise that this unit won't be competitive. But then, like, slowly but surely, somebody has an idea or somebody tries a thing, and they're like, wait, there is a use case. And so there's always the risk that maybe those more niche units end up fulfilling roles as counter units to, like, a specific enemy other unit. But I feel like with so many of them, it kind of reduces the necessity for that, or, like, the worry for that. The specific example to kind of illustrate the point that I would give is something like how the Eidolon specifically can emerge as a counter to Lachesis in TVZ, because the Eidolon outranges it, and you can bring an Anseal to detect, obviously. And so that's like one case where normally Lachesis are really good versus crowds and low HP units like Bio, but the Eidolon can kind of specifically deal with that. But I personally don't think that the Eidolon is useless in other situations. So it's kind of like it's specifically really good versus that kind of thing, but has other uses elsewhere. I mean, the unit can nuke and stuff, so obviously there's more than that unit, more than that use case.
It's funny because sometimes all you need is like a little bit of a mental buff to a unit, where there's like, oh, we reduced the tank cost by 1, and now people start building it, and turns out it's really good.
Oh yeah.
It's just people who have condemned the unit to be useless.
Well, that happened in Counter-Strike. There's a really famous example of it where all Valve did was reduce the buy cost of one of the other rifles by $300, and immediately people were like, "Oh, it's OP as fuck!" Like it was the whole time, but nobody was using it, right? So I feel like stuff like that can happen, and the inverse can happen too, where if you don't get that feedback, this is one of the other reasons to sort of celebrate the fact that our player base is increasing too, is because there was a period of time last year where people never made Solarians, the new carrier. They never made Solarians at all, and everybody kind of wrote them off as like not very useful in Cosmonarchy. And I was like, well, let me just, increase their armor here a little bit, or increase their shields here a little. And it was like 6 months of progressive minor tweaks that eventually made them actually really powerful. And only later on would they be discovered after that point. And then I had to kind of rein them in a little bit.
Yeah, it was when Mystery was still playing.
That's right. Yeah. So back in the day.
He used and abused it.
Of course, yeah. I mean, you got to do that. That's the other thing that I really like about some of the people in our community is if they think something is busted, they just play that race, play that strategy or whatever, and then they're like, I will prove to you that it is. And honestly, they kind of do. It's like either it works or somebody finds a counter to it and it doesn't work. And then either way, it's better because the developers will step in to correct something that's wrong, or somebody will come up with a solution that's actually pretty good. So, we've got a very different style of trying to approach game balance and like changing things than a lot of modern developers do, because I think ultimately we kind of recognize that the best part is to focus on the fun. That's something that was stressed in my interview with Sayan KCM and also with the Electric Underground earlier on this channel.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah.
like the whole idea should be, listen, you can try to go for something that's like competitive, but don't like over fixate on the esports side. And I agree. Like I mean, we obviously are
Yeah,
running
I
tournaments, but
think
I
that's
still don't think we
very,
need to fixate on
very
that. I think it
important.
really just needs to be fun at its core, right?
Yeah, I feel like one of the reworks that I was really excited about, it was more fun than competitive, I guess, is the Blissful Embrace
Yeah.
rework. I think it really came out great, and actually it's pretty competitively viable and it's not very busted. So, and it feels so thematic for the race. So I think it was a great success. And I don't know, is there were always like those mechanics that like you would see Blizzard, for example, only using the cutscenes,
Yeah.
and you can actually have them in the game and have them be fun. So you know, and not only they don't have to be used reserved for scripted missions and like cutscenes. You can do so much more.
Well, yeah, that's the point that you've been bringing up every now and then is like how as a kid when you played StarCraft 2, you were like, "Oh, the Nidus swarm must be really good because it can like train units or whatever because it spawns them in the campaigns." And then you actually played it and you found out that that wasn't at all what was happening,
You know,
right?
I thought they were like instant and that they unloaded so quickly. But
Mm.
when you actually play it, it has like this
It's like a
30
stagger.
seconds or something a
Oh,
time
okay.
where it's not 30, it's probably like 10, but it's like 10 seconds while it emerges, and then it loads units one by one
Hmm.
rather than quickly, and it's like so underwhelming compared to, and you also don't have the like drop pods nor like
Oh, yeah, that's right. That was the main
I
thing.
think Protoss can like warp in carriers or whatever, but of course they can't in multiplayer nor even I don't even think in Protoss campaign you can do that, but that was years later anyways. So.
Right, yeah, yeah. We are thinking about Wings of Liberty back then. Is like
Yeah,
there's no way
yeah.
for you to play as Protoss even in like the prologue missions and get access to that stuff. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean there were the fucking prophecy missions.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So
Need we say more, right? So I know that there's a couple of other things that were on the chopping block for today before we get to like the central topic, which is alluded to by the title of today's episode of Crow's Nest. But before we get to the Antikythera stuff, I wanted to ask you a little bit about pathfinding because you've been doing some research on that.
yeah, so I found this epic algorithm called Anya,
Hmm.
and it's any angle optimal pathfinding, and it's actually pretty fast. It's
Okay.
faster than Theta Star, which I was trying to use in Antikythera, and doesn't require to generate nav mesh, so it's viable for dynamic terrains, and it actually is working on grid, and it's actually pretty like clever how it works. I have to still figure out the exact details, but like it's fairly intuitive how it works,
Okay.
and it's pretty cool. So I've been experimenting with that. I was also experimenting with using CMake, and I'm starting to like it more and more, which is pretty cool. It seems to simplify building C++ projects a lot, especially when you factor in like adding libraries or having multiple like sub projects in a project. That's also simplified by that. I even discovered that we can do Unity builds, which is what we keep doing for everything. So it's compiling faster. So it's a very powerful tool. It's pretty cool. And I set up this like toy project for experimenting with pathfinding, and yeah, that leads us to the centric topic because I think that will probably serve us as the base for the reboot of Antikythera because
Mm.
that's something I want to do.
Okay.
I feel like Antikythera has not aged very well code wise, and I don't know if it's very easy to refactor it. So I will keep doing incremental progress on doing something better. We'll see how that goes. And I feel like I have way more experience now, so
Sure. Yeah.
I can do smarter choices, and we can definitely do something better. I have plenty of ideas of what I would want to do and how I would want to do them. Like asset streaming is one thing that I've been sort of like obsessively thinking about for like few months,
Okay.
wanting to do that because what we had back then was like we preloaded almost every asset and it like took like 10 gigs of RAM or something insane.
Yeah, that's pretty nuts.
And it was also like we will have instant boot times and also we will have yeah, it will also reduce the memory footprint
Right. Okay.
when I do what I want to do. So it's gonna be pretty good.
Well, listen, that reminds
And
me of something that Knight of the Realm, one of our internal homies, was doing some testing, and he didn't have much RAM, and so it started loading the assets to his hard disk or something, and it took him like I want to
yeah,
say like
so
5 minutes to start the game or something back in like an early build.
mm,
So that's kind of
yeah, it
to what
was
you were saying,
annoying.
right? Where the asset streaming will help out with that because it's not going to be all of them that are required at the same time.
Yeah, I also have ideas about how we can do it. Uh, Essentially, you want to preload a bunch of assets that are likely to happen after. Like if you build the racks, and it's pretty likely you might also load Maverick, so
Yeah.
you can queue the preloading of that asset. So it's sitting in the queue, and when there's when the like core of the when the threads of the asset loader are free, they can just load that. Uh, and I think that's gonna be pretty cool when that happens.
Yeah, I mean, just
Uh,
thinking about it from that perspective, right? Sounds like it should be possible to make it data driven since a while ago we made requirements
yeah,
themselves a
yeah,
little
yeah.
bit data driven. So you can basically point to like, okay, there's a unit entity linked in here or a unit entry linked in here as like a
Yeah, yeah,
requirement.
yeah.
So
I
preload
think
its graphic.
the new Antikythera will be way more data driven
Okay.
because I used to be way more like I don't know. I was obsessed about not doing dynamic race,
Right.
which is I think was pretty dumb because it really limited what was possible, and we can figure out optimizations later. And but I think we can be pretty data driven, which will be pretty nice. Uh, and obviously, one of the data drivers, I guess, would be Kairos,
Right.
which
Yeah.
is also pretty nice. I have also started working on that, although it's in a state where it's like 1,000 errors left or something to
Mhm.
compile it. So I don't know. I don't know how I should approach that because the way I did it, I extracted it from Antikythera and tried to correct the errors. Maybe it would have been better to first modernize the code and then extract it. I'm not
Mhm.
sure. So yeah, that's kind of unfortunate, but definitely did a lot of work there. So a lot of the errors already were removed, but fixed. But there's still way more work, and that wasn't really my focus the last few days, anyways. So
Yeah, you've been focused on other things, right? I mean, it's funny because
yeah.
obviously we're still working actively on Cosmonarchy for the bulk
Mm-hmm.
of this year, but some of the stuff like the Anya algorithm and also um, the whole potentially like some of the Kairos stuff as well, in theory, could be backported to be useful in Cosmonarchy, depending on the timing of
Yeah,
how it
Anya, I
finishes.
would really want to try to port to Brood War. That is my goal. If that works, that would be really nice. Like if we can actually point people to a mod to Brood War, to the new game in Brood War
Sure, yeah.
that has sensible pathfinding, that has um what's the name of it? It has no supply, has
Oh, sure,
no
yeah.
fucking unit limits,
Yeah, yeah.
has no selection limit, has all the goodies, has so many units. I don't know.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's pretty cool. So
Well, and just earlier today we
pathfinding
had
is
fixed a bunch of other stuff and we were adding more features. You know, like it just gets better
yeah
every day, man. It just gets better every day. Like the best time to get
yeah.
on the train, the hype train for Cosmonarchy was like I don't know, say a couple years ago when we just started. But the second best time is now. So if you're not into it yet, you gotta fix that real quick.
Yeah. Talking about Krigs, I am improving them,
Hmm.
and I was thinking I would want to make a. Is so Krigs were written in a very weird way. It was
Hmm.
before I knew how to write parsers, so it's like intermixing the lecture stage with the parsing stage.
Right.
So instead of like breaking down text to like smaller tokens like semis or whatever you would call them, it it immediately tries to parse them groups of characters into entire, let's say, expressions
Sure.
of what the program is. And if I could make actual like strings be tokens of strings and etc., that should give us better error handling and better more, I guess, expected behavior. It's just in some places I would have to probably we would probably need to go back and edit some of the older rigs.
Right.
So I'll have to think about how I want to best approach it. But I already refactored a lot of it. It's just functional changes that I have to probably now enforce, and that'll be good. I think we can extend creeks. I'm not sure. Uh, I mean, it's probably nice to have Kairos, and probably something we should try if possible. However, creeks are nice for just inline commands, so
Yeah.
improving that I think is nice. And then allowing, if we can get Kairos to work in Brood War, which would be really, really nice. I think that would work as like a main script running. So you would perhaps you would open the MPQ of the map, and you would add the script there, and it would be like this main script that has all the asynchronous calls and all the async goodies that Kairos allows that are essentially because for those unaware, Kairos essentially has those like, for example, a when keyword, and when you have when and a condition, it essentially tells the game to wait as many frames as needed for the condition to be met, and then execute some code. So it's essentially like triggers, but it's way more powerful. Like it's essentially you can essentially replicate every feature of triggers and more.
Right.
So that's why Kairos is pretty exciting, but it's definitely more of a scripting language rather than triggers, where it's like probably one main file and maybe it imports some other files, etc., etc. But
Yeah, and the weird
that
thing
is
about yeah, like if you're coming at it from like, oh, I like triggers, but I want them to be more powerful, you might be out of a little bit out of your depth if you go into something like Kairos's, main script stuff, because it will be very different. It will be more like programming, but hopefully we can encourage people to give it a try anyway, because there's some people who for whatever reason have just like written it off like, I can't program, that's not me. But I feel like that this sort of thing, I mean, as long as it has like reasonable error handling and stuff, it'll still be fine, I think.
Yeah,
so.
it had really good error handling.
Yeah.
That was something I was able to do really well. I was very proud.
There you
And one thing about Kairos is that it has this intuitive syntax, so it's almost like programming like in Python or whatever, but it also has types and like
yes. Okay.
brackets.
Yeah.
It's just because you have this they call it Varus operator in some other languages, I think, but it's like the double colon and equal sign is the like automatic assign of type, and it's like auto in C++ essentially. So it's pretty intuitive for people that are not programmers, I'd say.
There you go. Wow.
Pretty cool.
Hopefully we can get that stuff working in Brood War, but I do think that the biggest change would be the pathing, and if it works within Brood War, that's a pretty good indication that it'll work for Antikythera too. Pathing was once upon a time, it was one of our biggest things that we were worried about, because we were thinking, okay, well, we also want to be able to like edit the terrain in the middle of the map if like something blows up and destroys a chunk of the wall and like all this stuff. I'm not sure how it'll figure into that, because that's more of a dynamic thing of like in the middle of the game's running time. But at least for a static map, the Anya stuff to me kind of indicates that I think it was something you actually messaged me for. You were like, yeah, we'll have 500,000 units, dude, no problem, or something. So like, how are you feeling pretty bullish on that? Like that's like a thing that you think overall?
I think that probably can happen if we have multi-threaded DCS, but I don't know. Would be nice. Probably not our first game.
Sure, yeah. Well, I don't think we'll need it for our first game. I mean, just having a higher unit count than Cosmonarchy, which has a higher unit count than
I
StarCraft
definitely
1.
would want like 10,000 at
Sure,
least.
yeah.
That would be nice. I think it's ambitious enough
Yes.
for RTSs to have 10,000, but it's also very achievable, I think. So that is a goal we should shoot for, probably like 10,000 units. That's pretty good, I think.
Yeah.
And having bigger maps, improved war, stuff like that.
Being able to actually, one of the things too that I guess we can just say as like a general musing or something that I've noticed is that when you're talking about the way that, like, obviously we are all trying to achieve something greater in terms of scale of the number of units and the number of bases you take and all this other stuff than both StarCrafts. And StarCraft 2 has a higher scale of bases taken, where you'll go up to like 6-7 bases, but they mine out and you get them way faster than in Brood War, and like just super fast in terms of pacing. So we feel like, at least I'll say this for myself, but I feel like we're in alignment with this, is that the pacing is too fast, like it's out of whack for your expansion timing. So there's not really like earning the second the natural expansion, or like earning subsequent expansions in the same way. Yet at the same time, the combat pacing is also super fast too. So that like even though if you have this big blob of an army, it kind of disappears almost immediately. So it doesn't feel like you have a big blob, right?
I think banelings are just disgusting. Widow mines.
Yeah.
What the hell? Psionic storm? No.
Yeah, come on now.
I want that. Get it out.
It's too much. So that's, you know, when we compare that to like where we imagine, I think the future could end up looking like what Cosmonarchy already looks like, where you have all of these skirmishes across the map, like we talked about at the beginning. But I could also see a world where the skirmishing armies get bigger because, you know, the pathfinding is a little bit more permissive, but not to the point where it's like basically you don't have like the fluid problem of like, I could just like terrain doesn't really matter, right? Like in StarCraft
I love 2. If the this is optimal pathfinding, but it doesn't do any clump. Like we don't have to apply any extra clumping to it or anything like that. So if that works well, that would be really nice. I mean, I don't know, because when you have like tight chokes, clumping really helps to get units oriented together through the choke. So I don't know, maybe we accept that as a downside and you just have to micro chokes better or something.
Yeah, well, that would probably be better for like allowing some player to have a strategic advantage on the map, where like StarCraft 2 has this, but only because they have like a bunch of point and click AoE things like Storm, or you know, if you have a burrowed baneling there or whatever, right? Or like the Widow Mines. So like they make it so that the chokes matter because they have AoE attacks and all of this AoE stuff to punish clumping, and then they make the clumping automatic so that you have to like split your units manually, and that doesn't last very long anyway. So you know what I mean?
The clumping is disgusting. I have not realized how much it clumps.
Yeah.
Until like
you start watching Upsea streams, bro.
It's just like after you're playing Brood War for so long, when you see like I did not remember it being so aggressive, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's pretty disgusting how much it happens.
Yeah. I think it's a big influence on battles insofar as you can still not want to go down a choke in StarCraft 2. So I'm not saying that there's no punishment for it, but I feel like that punishment is like overly enforced and not something that happens organically, you know what I mean? But that's also maybe a symptom of the maps all being like super stripped down. They're starting to have a little bit more creativity with the maps, but I don't know if everybody just immediately shouts at them for being creative. So I have no idea what the actual quality of the maps is.
No, people start calling them out for being inspired by Brood War.
Oh, okay.
Because you have like those minerals on ROMs or whatever that you can mine out, and
there's like worker only pathways where you can only.
Oh yeah, that's pretty interesting. Yeah. I don't know. It's cool that people are experimenting.
Yeah.
I saw Day9 cast. I watched a little bit of Day9 lately. I watched him cast a match where the guy was like it felt way more like Brood War, where you had to where he had to defend, like fight for his natural and stuff.
Okay.
It was pretty cool. Like having to station some units to defend worker, because they have this like base where you have gold minerals here, and then some units can come here.
Right.
So there's like ramp here, minerals here, nexus here, and here are like a pathway the units can come.
So you can punish the gold, yeah.
So it's I saw that somewhere in Brood War too, in like ASL maps, I think. It's the weird ass map with assimilators, I think.
Oh, maybe.
I think that one has it.
The other one that I'm thinking of is La Campanella, which has the cross in the middle. It's the same tile set as Nemesis. It has like these bases where you can it's very easy to deny the gas mining in like the lower bases in the middles. So that kind of I would also analogize it to like Sideshow in Cosmonarchy, where they're on the 12 and 6 positions. The minerals are like by the water, so you can siege them there.
Yeah. That is very, very alike. So that's pretty cool. It's nice to see some experimenting. And I guess we should add rich minerals to Cosmonarchy because we haven't yet.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they would work out. I mean, I feel like people already float to 5K minerals or whatever, so I don't know.
Noobs. Skill issue.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny because, you know, that's always a nice refrain.
Every time I say it's a skill issue to spend your minerals, Neblime is like, I will watch all your replays, and I will every time you float, I will mention it to you.
Hey, well, the way you gotten around him is by not playing, so you have no replays to watch. he's out of here. Can't do it.
I played a few games yesterday, I think.
Oh yeah, that's right, because you were
Briefly.
helping Hapsea practice in preparation for his ass whooping that he was going to hand out. Speaking of, that actually is something I'm going to be casting later today after this recording. I will say
Nice.
we're coming up on that because obviously today we didn't have a crazy amount of time, or I didn't have a crazy amount of time before that cast. So we should probably get over to our donator questions. But before that, are there any sort of like wrap up thoughts about the fact that you wanted to work on Antikythera some more, and the fact that we're talking about this pathfinding stuff, and like anything that comes to mind as like a
It's an
general thought?
exciting time to live, I guess, and
Yeah,
wait for Epic, because Epic shall happen.
there it is. Epic Q7 is in progress right now. It's being upgraded at the Forge, whatever the fuck that means. I don't know what is a Forge. I don't. Does anybody know what a Forge is?
I don't know.
I will say
I
though
thought
as
it
well.
made upgrades, but I don't know what upgrades are.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
sorry.
What's an upgrade exactly? You mean you mutated your pool into a pond? That's something I can get behind. Now, when it
Or you
comes
got
to
tier 2, maybe.
yeah. When it comes to briefly, I wanted to mention. I don't know if you followed any of the other RTS games that are coming out recently, like in the last little bit. But apparently there was this like kind of mild controversy where Frost Giant Studios released a GDC talk for like and it was basically like the whole thing was just an ad for their software that apparently they're going to try to license out later or something. But I don't know all the details, but I thought it was very funny that they were talking about how it's a very ambitious goal for them to support 1,000 units in their engine. And, we were just talking about 10,000 being like a minimum.
I mean, there's one thing I can recommend to you people. Don't make games in Unreal. It's not a great thing. Especially when they are RTS games. Like,
Yeah.
if you want to make like a horror game or like a first person something shooter and probably don't have high ambitions for scale,
Yeah.
maybe it works, right? It looks pretty good, right?
Yeah.
But it's not that fast, so don't make RTSs in it. And it's also funny because their game doesn't even look good, so I don't know why they chose Unreal.
I don't know what they're leveraging Unreal for in that sense. Yeah, it's a bit weird.
I don't know. It's dummies.
Well, dummies indeed. In that case, let's go to a cohort of people who are not at all dummies. They are our donors, the people who spend money on us, on our coffee page. So you can, of course, go to that. There'll be a link in the description. You want to support shows like this and games like the ones that we're building. And I've got some exciting questions here. The first of which, of course, is going to be Lucifirius's. He's opening us up with a bit of a banger question. He asks, if Pr0nogo is a crow and Neblime is a lemon, what's Veeq7? What are the other prominent members of the Discord?
You can see me now, so I'm a man.
I'm a man
I
Q7.
used to be a crow, and then I grew up. So.
Yeah, he hatched again. He went back into the egg.
Yeah, it's reincarnation,
Yeah.
Just coded enough.
That's right.
C++ that I became a man.
That's how you become a man.
Leveled up.
Yeah.
Veterancy that we don't ever do.
Oh yeah, jeez, I forgot about veterancy. I don't know who are other prominent members of the Discord. Anybody come to mind? Would Hapsea be a gorilla? I'm not sure.
Well, Kian's probably a crow.
Yeah, I mean that's the problem. Is if I'm also a crow, then is he a 3? Is he just a
He's
number
a 3?
3? Yeah,
yes,
okay.
Of course.
Yeah.
He's a 3.
Yeah, a walking, talking 3.
And Diev is a calendar, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. You know what DF would like to be?
Volatile is like a main hero from Fallout or something.
Yeah, that's what he likes to.
His avatar.
That's his avatar, but he could also be an orc that is very happy to snort cocaine because that's like his waifu character or something in some game.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And dude, Btyb is a map making machine.
Okay. There's a cartographer.
Myrian has to be like a gigabrain 4D chess like story writer or something, or
You think so?
He evaluates worlds that don't exist and tries to solve them or something.
Oh, okay, yeah. He is always gathering more data on that with his questions.
Yes. He's always has very, very specific and important questions. So
he writes the encyclopedias, dude. That's what he's doing.
Maybe
He's like a famous author.
I don't know. His questions are always so deep. I would have never imagined such questions, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So pretty cool.
There you go. And speaking of, he's actually going to ask our next question here. He asks, if y'all were forced to make a small scale RTS, like Brood War scale or lesser in terms of units and unit cap per player, how would the club go about it? So this is an interesting question because we just got done talking, Veeq, about how we really love how different everything is in Cosmonarchy and how it's like way better. But if we had to go back, how would we basically make Brood War but better? I guess is like the essence of the question.
Brood War but better. Well, I would make skills the spells. I would rework spells to be better. Because they're just point and clicks, guaranteed. Like they have a guaranteed effect on the world. They are pretty impactful for not that much agency. Maybe I'll try to make smart casting work. I don't know, but I have this idea that all spells should just be like shorter and smaller, and you should be essentially they should be even more skill expressive. Like they should be hard, and I feel like that could lead to something interesting. I don't know what the knockout effects exactly are, what other like balance decisions that entails, but I feel like it could be interesting. Would make more interesting upgrades. If we can make more units, we can do more upgrades. Ideally, those would have audio visuals because I don't think upgrades without audio visuals are that great. I don't know. I would have more units, but
yeah, if we're limited to the unit
scale. I mean, depends what scale you're thinking of. Because if you're scaling scale in terms of the unit count in game, then yeah, sure. Let's just add more units. Let's keep economy on the lower side. Let's focus the game on skirmishes. Make it very choke heavy, and maybe what's cool is like have map control oriented resources. Like if any of you know they are billions where you have to like actively go after every fucking resource on the map, maybe something like that works for a small scale game. I don't know.
Or something like maybe something like where there's neutral things that when you control them they give you some buffs or whatever. Like the Fountain of Healing is something that comes out. Fountain of Health, I guess it's called in Warcraft 3. Something like that
Esport
could be.
Towers?
Yeah, esports towers. Yeah, big deal. You know, it's funny is we technically have the structure for that in Cosmonarchy. There's the standalone version of the lodestone where when you garrison it, it gives you detection and you can shoot out of it like a anchor. So that's kind of funny. But I haven't used it in any maps yet. But I put it in as a prank on Otherworld for like a screenshot at one point.
Do you know what's better than esport towers? Neutral Niduses.
Yeah, that's true, dude. Neutral Niduses are pretty hype. Neutral Niduses are pretty high. We'll see if we can fit them into another map sometime. Yeah, okay. Thinking about the scale part, right? So I feel like if you're going to go from the angle of like, okay, the scale of the tech tree has to be small, and because he says like unit cap per player, I'm thinking he's probably talking about like enforcing a unit limit. I don't know that we would re-add supply in that case, though, because I feel like supply is like... it's just the edge case, which is not really an edge case because it happens in a large percentage of games, of your supply going down and then like production structures not working anymore is really bad.
Maybe the way we would go about it is when your supply blocked, your production like works at half the rate or something. Yeah. Because then you're still penalized, but it can technically be a strategic decision to go supply blocked. Technically, although I guess the value lose is too big. I don't know. Maybe something like that could work.
Yeah, the value would be almost instantaneous, I think, because like as soon as you go over the supply level. Well, that's the other thing is like, do you if we re-add supply, if we're thinking about supply, do you get supply taken away from you when your unit finishes or when your unit starts? Because if it's when your unit starts, which is like how StarCraft 1 works and StarCraft 2 as well, then yeah, you instantaneously lose that value when you go over. But maybe it's like, I don't know, it could be interesting to think about stuff like that. But
could be, because then you could try to time out the finish of supply with the finish of like a phalanx in a key timing or something. It could be interesting, but yeah, I don't know. Mid game and late game is where most supply problems come into place. And I guess you could add tiers to supply or something like that, like auras we tried with treasury.
Yeah.
but it didn't really work that
Yeah,
well.
evolving the
I know Faguto
overload.
always has mentions a lot that he doesn't exactly like the pacing ever since we removed supply, but I'm not exactly sure how to circumvent that. And I feel like after Scarscape update, it's already so much better personally. So
I feel like the supply thing is definitely a question to ask, but assuming if we just adopt like a StarCraft 1 styled supply method, the idea of going back to a Brood War scale or lesser, you definitely need to think about your upgrades. I guess ideally it would be more like I would probably have like a factional based system or like based on your race, you have a different style of upgrade. By that I mean like maybe the Terran add-ons can activate a certain upgrade module that permanently gives a unit an upgrade based on that. And then if that module switches over from like because you remember what back in the day we had this idea like Superbag, maybe I think this was before your time, but we had this concept of like you would have mutually exclusive unit availability where you'd have
yeah,
the
I know.
escalation system.
It's
Yeah.
Hydra 2.0.
Yeah,
Some
that's
of
right.
the
Like
yeah, I have been there.
right, okay, yeah. So the Cyprian, I think it was like you enabled between
The
Cyprian and
Cyprian and
Huracan.
Fireband.
Yeah, and then
It was Fireband
right,
back then.
yeah, and then like the medic and shaman were two different ones too.
Yes,
So,
yes, yes.
so something like that, but
I
instead
think
of unit
something like that for
availability,
upgrades
yeah, something like that
would
for
be
upgrades.
interesting.
Yeah. So, and it
And
would be permanent on that unit, but it wouldn't necessarily be permanent in the sense of like it's this
also,
upgrade can't be on my unit perpetually. It's like based on how I created them, they have this feature,
yeah,
right?
it could be interesting.
Something like
I
that.
mean, I feel like it's interesting still. Like, there's a layer of depth to upgrades that act immediately on all the units that you have.
Right.
But it's also like powerful, so that should be balanced somehow. And I could see, but having like a racial upgrade type that seems interesting. Maybe one of your upgrade types is the racial one, and then there are ones like you either have mutually exclusive ones, either maybe you have like tiered ones or something. Like there's so much more you can have with the space of like how to make interesting upgrades than Brood War did and StarCraft 2 did.
Yeah. Well, if we're
And
thinking about a lower unit variety, like the tech trees aren't as big as Cosmonarchy, then the upgrades make up for that. That's what they're supposed to do. So you could imagine actually that like the escalation system, instead of changing what units you have available, just changes like an ability they have. So like the siege tank equivalent might have like siege mode by default, but you can change that using an escalation to give them instead of a long range entrenched form, they have like a closer range, super high durability form or something, and that would be like a stylistic compositional choice where you basically convert a unit from one type to another. Or maybe it would be something more similar to what it already is. Like maybe it would go from long range to mid range, but it would deal line trace damage. So
it
it'd be
kind
different,
of
right?
kind of makes me think of the ideas that we had for Onitar. Where we had the idea of having individual traits that you can combine for
Yeah.
units. So
Right.
I guess you could have Fulcrum with like three different mutual traits that all apply to all the units, and then you can have like interesting permutations between them or something.
Yeah.
That could be interesting.
Yeah,
So
and in
something like
fact,
that.
like that, the Onatar method could work very nicely for a game, and Onatar was envisioned to be like StarCraft scale in terms of the tech tree size, but then like the permutations of the premonition system, right? Like that idea gives you a different look, right? So you get the ability to have these different like these different traits, like you were describing, would basically serve to make the unit customized in some way that it would be better at this thing and worse at that thing, right? So there would be like some depth to that
Yeah,
choice, yeah,
that'd be cool.
something like that, probably. Okay. Well, let's move on to the Shambler's question. Then he asks, if you had to make an RTS with upgrades being a major mechanic, how would you go about it? Well, we kind of just talked about that. You know, I guess that nicely answers
Dude,
Shambler's question already.
what is the if you are a crow, then what is Shambler?
A Shambler.
Oh,
Yeah, he's from Darkest
from
Dungeon or
Darkest
something.
Dungeon.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's why he named himself that.
fine.
Yeah, I had to manually mask out the
He had a
Shambler PNG.
pretty epic music for Ascension 6, I think. Or
Yeah,
something.
and 7 as well. It was also in 7. But yeah, the hype video stuff that he had, right?
Yeah, the hype videos were one of a kind. You need to make them again.
Yeah. I mean, I did one for this round, but it didn't have the user selected music. I was planning on doing that for the throne room stage, but then I didn't have time to do like the full length one, so I went for a shorter one instead. But yeah, we'll work on that, of course. Yeah, okay. I mean, like, I don't know if there's much more to add about the upgrade stuff. Like, we talked about the pretense system from Onatar. We talked about escalations being used as a similar analog to that.
I think one idea I hosted yesterday, because we talked about it too,
Hmm.
was that what if you had tier 3, so like in Cosmonarchy, what if you had instead of having like Stimpack for Maverick, what if you had like a tier 3 upgrade for Maverick? So it's like a strategic choice. Instead of it being a given, like in StarCraft 2, if you go Stalker oriented builds, you go Blink, right?
Hmm.
It's pretty obvious. But if you have like this late game thing that you can focus on that scales your early game unit, this is a strategic choice. There are so many other options you can choose. It's not necessarily a given. So I feel like something like that could be very interesting. And also, I just feel like we ought to. One thing is always audio visuals for upgrades.
Yes,
That's
yeah,
a
yeah.
necessity IMO. And the second thing is actually having more interesting upgrades. I mean, I guess upgrades can be interesting, like Quacklings, for
Yeah,
example,
yeah.
is a super fucking basic upgrade, but it actually is interesting how it like changes the matchup. I feel like,
Yeah, yeah.
but I feel like generally having more interesting upgrades that do something interesting to the unit is nice. In like Hydra 2.0, we used to have just like the most boring upgrades where, oh, for Paladin you would research Skyfall, and for the spellcasters you would research plus 50 energy. So it was so boring,
Yeah, it's
and
exactly like
we,
StarCraft 1, right?
yeah, exactly. And having something more interesting where it's like, oh, imagine instead of like alters how Paladins shoot, and they like,
Mm.
as a tier 4 upgrade, instead of shooting one missile in a line, you should like uh, free,
Of course.
free, free,
Free.
free, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
this. Uh,
Gotcha.
and
Putting the freeze out there.
freeze. Uh, yeah, like more interesting patterns.
Yeah.
Something that's completely different. Something that is that adds depth, that changes how you view the unit
Hmm.
is what I would go for, and something that is a strategic decision. I think that's important. And without that, it's not that interesting.
And that's kind of the problem with incremental upgrades where it just increases your damage, because even though it can be impactful, nobody's denying that. Like Zealots start two hitting Zerglings in StarCraft 1 if you upgrade +1, if you have
Mm.
a +1 lead in melee weapons to Zerg Carapace. So, like, that
Well, the
is a pretty
argument
big
seems
deal.
to be that you can scale your units, right? But I feel like if you're even an upgrades, then you're actually not scaling your units. So maybe something like in Age of Empires is more sensible, where you actually can upgrade the earlier units
Mm.
to be better, to scale them to be competitive with the later units. That probably makes more sense rather than just like +1 damage. And the only reason that in Brood War the attack upgrades and armor upgrades happen to be good for the game is because they happen to have breakpoints in them.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
So it happens that at some places the exact difference of upgrades completely changes the matchup on its head, right? And that's very interesting, but it's not really replicable. We found, I think, in Cosmonarchy when we had in Hydra actually when we still had upgrades. We actually had upgrades up to 10th level,
Yes.
and it didn't really. I don't think it really did that much. And it did some stupid edge cases where like +5 Minotaur would be unkillable by most units or something.
Oh,
Plus
there's
five
also, if you
armor.
think about +10 Maverick, and it just,
God,
like, kills
yeah,
everything in the whole game. So,
ridiculous. I remember when Don Sviatlo still played. It
yeah.
was he always just fucking went to the corner and
Yeah.
like didn't play the game for 30 minutes only to fucking kill everyone with 10 units
Yes.
on one base.
Yeah. So
So
it wasn't
yeah, that
very,
was that
yeah,
was
it wasn't very positive, I would say. Well, the other thing too is that the way that the upgrades work when they're incremental is that, like you're saying about, like, sometimes they happen to have breakpoints, so that's interesting. You can see this if you watch a lot of StarCraft 1 pro games, that there's going to be a point where you, like, why would you even bother getting vehicle plating versus dragoons? Like, that doesn't help you at all, right? Because the
yeah.
damage is too high after a certain
I mean, I
point of damage.
criticized Armor and Armor Pen for the exact same reason. It's linear number scaling, which doesn't always result in a change, and sometimes it just doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
Which I feel like in Cosmonarchy it sort of worked out, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, and it's also something that you
Uh,
can, like, one of the things I was mentioning recently about the Uptecton is that in an effort to make those like high DPS or high raw damage units interact with armor a bit more. Although they do interact with armor a lot right now. Like if I removed the 5 armor pen that the Uptecton has, it suddenly that's the difference between it like one shotting and it two shotting like a bunch of units. So it actually is pretty impactful. But I was thinking that pretty recently it should probably fire 5 attacks of 10 damage each, but it would be like a quick charge up and then releasing them all at once, and that would be cool thematically.
I remember that Mask had a comment early on that Paladin is only balanced because like early Paladin was only balanced because it dealt 10 times 10 and not just 100, and that meant armor actually
interacted with it, right?
Tempered the unit a little bit.
Yeah, so moving into that direction a little bit seems like an obvious move. There's some units where I'm not really sure how to do that, like the Phalanx in Siege mode. I could like cut its damage in half and make it shoot twice as fast, and that would help it a little bit, but like it would be less thematic for me as like a unit than what it currently is, where it just fires one singular blast. And I think it can be nice to have exceptions to the system every now and then that kind of like break out of the system, but I can see where you can levy a systems-based criticism at that and say, like, well, hey, this unit doesn't interact with armor. Although, again, similar to the Uptecton case, the Phalanx actually has no armor pen, so, you know, and the Acantor is in a similar state where the Acantor deals, like, 80 damage or something, and, like, Cyclops used to live, they have a little bit more health now, Cyclops lived with 1 HP. And it was like, that's because they had 1 armor, baby. So it does actually matter. It's just really, really silly. Also, Cyclops are busted.
It can be hard to visualize, which is probably the biggest thing. But I feel like the Cosmonarchy is a complicated game with a lot of depth, and you just have to. Some of it you just have to learn by playing, and it's probably fine if it's not the easiest thing. It's just, I don't know.
There's always ways we can improve it. That's right.
Both directions, right?
Yeah.
So I'm happy where we are definitely with Cosmonarchy, and there's a lot to explore. And yeah, let's tackle Btyb's question.
That's right.
If you had to make an RTS or RPG with heroes and creeps like Warcraft 3, how would you do it?
Well, this is a question for the ages, isn't it? Listen, man, Warcraft 3 is probably some of the most ridiculous gameplay you'll see out of a competitive RTS game, because all I remember is Grubby streaming his orc gameplay and having a Blade Master and yelling at the screen while the battle was going on, and he would just say, "Come on, crit!" And it's like, yeah, dude, exactly. So the first thing I would say is definitely no RNG. But the other thing I would say is that, like, I feel like Warcraft 3 doesn't actually... If you're going to have the heroes be a component, then it feels like Warcraft 3 doesn't really lean into that much, actually. Like, obviously the heroes make a huge difference, but I feel like the units by comparison are kind of designed not in a way that it doesn't feel like the units were very intentionally designed, and they had like the Brood War syndrome of like, some of these units just have like this thematic thing, like, isn't it so cool that ghosts can lock down, but like in practice nobody ever uses them. And so like there are some units, like I've been watching funnily enough, I've been watching some of Grubby's tier lists where he'll rank all of the units in the game. And something that he says from a professional standpoint that I think is also ringing true when you just look at the design is that some units actually don't really have a place. And then other units, they have a place, but only as a counter to other units. So they're not like... In a game where you have 12 units per race or something compared to 50, like in Cosmonarchy, I actually feel like having a hard counter system or a system where this unit counters that unit is a lot more damaging, because you don't have like, oh, well, he's countering this one unit I have 49 others. It's like, no, he's countering 1 out of my 12, and maybe I've only gained access to 6 or something like that. And so I need to, I've already gained access to half of the army that I can make, half of the unique units, and he's countering 1/6 of what I have access to right now. That's actually a much bigger ratio than, 1/10 or 1/12 or whatever at the early game, right?
Exactly. I feel like organic counters are fine, but role-defined units or King IMO, and always prefer that to like a fucking spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Oh, this unit counters that unit, and that unit counters this unit. I mean, I feel like that kind of work in like AoE 2, and AoE 2 is probably pretty good. I have not experienced that much of it. It seems decent, and it has like a rock paper scissors system, but yeah, I feel like a role-based system with more units is just more interesting. And I think I would still do something like that with an RTS with RPG elements thing. And I think Mark from Electric Underground said this thing that there's a lot... a big tendency to just add RPG elements to every game,
Yeah.
which is kind of stupid. And there's not really many pure RPGs where you actually have a choice.
Yeah.
So I guess the thing to explore, if you want to have heroes, actually allow to make them be your own thing rather than having like archetypes or whatever. Just have a fucking, I don't know, if you want to have skill trees, then actually have interesting choices in it.
Yeah.
Allow like customization, personalization. Allow to specialize a lot. Maybe have multiple heroes or something. And still, I think you need to apply the fundamentals, the things that we have learned. So like, think about composition. Think about just like the good design. Even if we had to like design Cosmonarchy without the scale element, I think a lot of the lessons would still apply. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, the compositional thing is a big deal. So like, I agree that like the skill tree is something to look at. I would probably try to adapt the Warlord's Battlecry style of hero where I mean, you have the leveling up system, which is kind of a problem because I don't really know how I would do it. If somebody just told me, hey, replace heroes with something else, then I have like plenty of things I could do. But if we have to keep the hero part, then I don't know exactly how you tackle the level up part. That's what creeps are for.
Well,
In addition
he said
to
that it should be with creeps.
Yeah.
So I guess they just kill the creeps, but I don't know. It's not that interesting.
I feel like the creeps need to be their own
to-
thing that you can like. They almost should be more involved than just being like maybe some of them can just be enemies. But actually, Warlord's Battlecry has this kind of neat system where they will have units that are hostile to everybody, like a neutral hostile, right? Like similar to creeps. But they'll actually be kind of dynamic on the map. They're not very intelligent, but they like
Yeah, that'd be cool.
they
That's
like have a
something we talked
spawn point,
about.
and then they just roam the map basically. And so you could
That's
imagine
something we
doing
talked
stuff.
a lot about in like two episodes back, I think, about like the creeps and how we would do them.
Yeah.
Comparing that to Stormgate and whatever. But yeah, I think intelligent creeps would be interesting. One thing about heroes that I kind of like, I don't know how applicable this is to RTS and how much it has sense, but I kind of like the permanent death aspect of like RPGs.
Okay.
And I feel like that's like if I had to make like an action game, I would probably go with that. It could be interesting. Like you're building a team, you're creating
Yep.
those characters. They have their own dreams, and then one of them suddenly is crushed by an orc or something.
Right. Okay.
I feel like it would be pretty cool.
Yeah, well, imagine
and
you
with-
have to go back to the drawing board and make a new hero, or you can make like more than one hero, obviously. And like in this RTS RPG kind of case, like if you lose your
maybe.
hero, it's actually permanent, right? So
Maybe it's like you do have many heroes, and you build them, and you try to make a composition of heroes, and you specialize them, and they can die, and if they die, maybe some of their experience goes back to your like town center or something, and you can respend it later, or I don't know.
Yeah, could be something.
Some things to explore, I guess.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe maybe like that. You could listen. Nobody said this had to be a competitive game. Like, I mean, in the sense of it's like super trying to be competitive 1v1 or whatever. Maybe you would have like the RTS part would be like the base building and stuff, but and also doing the hero management.
Yeah, maybe it's like of a procedurally generated game.
Yeah.
Something maybe like Factorio, but with more depth, more like unit types and like races, maybe biomes,
and not biter,
etc.
Yeah, no spitter.
No bitter, no spitter. Yeah, so something like that could be interesting if you want to go the casual route.
Yeah,
so.
I was just thinking like it doesn't have to be giga competitive in that sense, and it would be something where we could actually, I think in some ways it would be almost good to like explore. Here's like let's go super deep on trying to make heroes work in a system, and then it's like okay, well. How would we try to adapt this to PvP later? Like, let's just do the PvE part first.
I think you had this saying that ideas don't matter, and what matters is execution, and I feel like that's very true. Like, whatever idea we take, we can probably execute on it very well, and still have it be compelling.
Yeah.
It's the large games were not finished, really, I would say.
Yeah, you have to know what you're doing. I guess that's another way to think about it is just know what the idea is, which is like a way to clue in on what the execution has to be. Because if you think that the idea is like, I'm going to tell this epic story, but actually you're supposed to be building an RTS, then you're going to end up with a large game, right? Like it's not going to work out in the single player.
Yeah. If there are too many competing ideas that they aren't coherent together, then that won't work. So don't do that.
Don't do that.
Don't be lard.
Don't be lard. Well,
Don't be Manson.
we have one last question here, and it is 3Crow's question. He asks a question that I'm sure you're interested in, and we've talked about this a little bit, but can you guys discuss your wishes/plans for the extents of AI behavior, strategy, etc. for Antikythera titles? What do you think, Veeq? Our wishes and plans. I mean, obviously, I've talked a lot about how, like, you know, I want the AI to like be able to contain me and also respond to me dropping it in space. How do we get that, Veeq? How are we going to do that? It's a hard question.
Dude, how about we do something interesting, and I program you a Krieg that allows you to plan a Krieg drop, a circuit drop.
Oh, okay.
So in Zerg tutorial, you can prepare a circuit drop. That's something I want.
I will add that if you give me the nature, I will do it. I'll put it in.
Yeah, no. There's a ton of stuff, and it's. I don't know.
Dude, wait, hold on. 1 in 256 chance for the AI to open with a circuit drop instead of his pool rush. Just saying. Just saying. Miracle.
255 into 56. I don't know.
Oh, okay. I see. 1 in 256 chance to get it normal.
That he will not troll.
Yeah, you got to defeat him first, and then he plays serious.
Dude, I don't know. When he swarms you with like all those quasis, and then he also just fucking circuit drops you again. Also, so that would be pretty based. I don't know. Things like that definitely, like having them create outposts on the map, having them do contains, having them obviously kite even better than they already do in Cosmonarchy.
Maybe valuing the lives of their units a lot more than the current AI does.
Yeah,
and harassment is
nice. Like if you I kind of would want them to like mute a micro or whatever the equivalent is. That'd be cool. Yeah, a lot of things that we should have had and we haven't.
And nowhere in the whole universe of RTSs does it exist yet somehow. So we got to fix that too. Like how is there not an AI that will harass me in like a way that a player might, like anywhere analogous to it?
Yeah, Doom drops would be nice, and harassment drops, and there's so much that they could do.
Basically, just look at all of the crazy strategies, like what Lundier did with him only making wardens and envoys. Let's see if we can get an AI doing that. That's what I want to just transport the static defense into the base.
And then we also need a AI that is my name is lol and just builds every one unit of every kind. So that would be epic.
Mono battle mode.
Yeah, that's my goal. I want that. I think that's more important than intelligent AI.
Yeah, well, it's a certain kind of intelligence.
Back in the days, I would tell you, I would want my AI to use Nidoses, but you know what? It works.
It does. It does.
And they can also technically proxy you. So
yeah, and that has happened before. Apparently, like somebody, I think it was one of the first times that Art of Turtle was playing, and he obviously is playing Zerg. And I think he told me once that he got proxy Nidus, and he's like, "What the fuck? The AI's BMing me."
So, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty based. Yeah, so basically being able to do all that stuff. Like the summary of our thoughts on this, I think, is just that we want the AI to be capable of doing things that you would expect a good player to be able to do, at least to try those strategies, and then to sort of operate behind them. Like a very limited version of this is how the AI in the Zerg tutorial 7 pulls you, or early pulls you as it currently is. Maybe I'll accelerate it to be a little bit faster, but
I want
go ahead.
I would summarize this as I want the AI to be a good troll.
There you go.
I want it to be.
There you go.
I want it to have fun.
Yeah, okay, I like that for sure. I mean, remember that the AI is supposed to be a stand-in for like an in-universe commander, and so if you imagine like in a training sim or like whatever, it's like, I'm over here just throwing like a proxy anchor, like doing crazy stupid stuff and killing you with those. And it's like, I'm not taking you seriously. And then you start to break the contain. And then he's like, oh, I guess I got to really play. I mean, a similar thing happened when I had Urbon on and I set up the game with him. And then we played a 1v1 and I was in tutorial mode for a while. And then he started to sort of like beat me back. And I was like, oh, I should actually use the money I have floating. And so like stuff like that is sort of like how we could maybe have the AI be operating on. It's like they don't really take you seriously until they need to. Stuff like that could be cool. So, but yeah, there's all sorts of cool stuff we'll do with the AI. I think with the Zerg tutorial, it early pulls you, and then it tries. If you survive that, It has a follow-up attack, but it's actually much smaller than the previous one, so it might break you if you barely survived. And then otherwise, it's like double expanding and going into Hydras after. So it like has like a follow-up, and being able to have that level of strategy, right?
Hydras are strong.
Yes, yeah. People like Hydras. They think they're very well-balanced units. So
pretty cool.
Yeah. All right, man. Veeq7, my man. You have appeared on camera. You are a real man. That is pretty much the show here. You got any final thoughts for us to chew on?
I don't really think so. I think it's all. It's pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
Like Cosmonarchy, IMO.
That's right.
Just one click.
Just one click, and it's down there in the description box. We'll see you guys on the battlefield. And GG's, man. We'll be back later. Peace.
GG's.